Joining us now is our brilliant panel, Associate Editor at The Australian, Jenna Clark, and Media Writer for The Australian, Sophie Ellsworth. Ladies, welcome as always. Soph, we understand Meghan and Harry have had a short break in Portugal after the Invictus Games. What's the story?
Well, they have, Caroline. They've shot over there for several days of I guess you could possibly say a well-earned break, but obviously there's always a lot of fanfare when they go on holidays. Look, I'm not going to begrudge them for taking a holiday. They're well within their rights to do that. But look, they seem to be clocking up the kilometres on the aeroplane, so I'm not quite sure, Caroline, how that fits in with their climate agenda that they continue to push onto all of us.
That's probably not a convenient time to discuss this, though. They don't want people talking about that, Soph. But, Jenna, everyone's entitled to a holiday, aren't they? Including royals and our pollies, who also seem to get in trouble when they go on holiday. Do you think people get a little too obsessed about these things?
Look, I think we do, Caro, but also I don't understand what Harry and Megs are having a holiday from, because don't forget they're not working royals anymore, and when they're not attending the opening of envelopes for, charitable donations of more than $1,000, probably because it's tax deductible, I have actually no idea what they do.
No, you're not an orphan there, Jenna. But staying with you, it's also been reported this week that Kate isn't going to accompany William to the Earthshot Awards so she can stay at home with the kids. The commentary, it's gone into meltdown. I don't see what the big deal is.
Yeah, it is odd, and I think it just goes to show this is another way where the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to really move the royal family into modern times, where I guess back in the day we saw, before their divorce, the former Prince and Princess of Wales would do everything together. But now, William's gone over to talk about the climate, so, there's only one person there, whereas Kate's just staying home and focusing on events that really mean a lot to her, whether it be children, education, early childhood and things like that. And I think it's wonderful, they're joint CEOs of the Waleses now. So it is interesting to see that they've decided to move it into the next frontier, and a lot of people are outraged because they probably don't get to see Kate in a pretty dress, whereas she's actually just putting in the hard yards and doing a job.
And so if Kate went everywhere with William, there'd be criticism that she didn't spend enough time with her kids. Isn't it for them to find the right balance for their family?
Oh, Caroline, look, I think it's good that she's actually doing what's very important to her, and that is spending time with her children, making sure they go to school and helping them in any way she can. Look, she's very hard to criticise, Caroline. Like, she seems to never put a foot wrong. I like the fact that she's decided to put her family first in this instance. She doesn't need to go everywhere with William, and I think that's again why she just ticks another box with the public. Like, she shows her very authentic side, and that she does want to be a mother as well. She's not just going around to events and flying around the world. She's actually staying at home with her children and helping raise them.
Jenna, moving on, you're the queen of all things pop culture here at Sky News Australia. Meghan Markle's former Suits co-star Patrick J. Adams has published some rather cryptic social media posts this week referring to the Duchess. They were then deleted. What were they, and what's all the fuss?
It is really interesting. Now, Patrick J. Adams was very close to Meghan Markle on the set, and also don't forget he was one of the biggest, talking heads when the Prince and Princess decided to talk out about their relationship all those years ago. He did publish something. It was like a throwback to when they were on the set, which got the social media turbines into overdrive. That potentially she was coming back onto Suits, and I love the fact that he deleted them and then put up this grovelling apology, which was sort of in the guise of apologising to the fact that he posted this in the midst of that actors and writers strike in Hollywood. Whereas I think if you read between the lines and put my pop cultural monocle on, I think the clapback was probably coming from the Sussex's PR firm to say maybe take that down, because if we're going to announce if we're coming back to Suits, it's going to be one Meghan Markle, not you, mate.
Yeah, that's entirely, well, that there is really rather plausible. But so maybe it was just some nostalgia, or maybe it was part of something else to keep the Sussexes in the headlines.
Well, look, a lot of people who have known Meghan Markle over the years always try to insert themselves into stories because it obviously gains so much traction, Caroline. So this is probably just yet another example of that. But it's certainly got the rumour mill swirling in regards to Suits. But I'm with Jenna on this. I reckon there might have been some stern words coming from the Markle camp. What on earth are you doing posting this stuff? And it never looks great when you put stuff on social media and then quickly delete it and issue an apology. So something's gone on behind the scenes here for sure.
It definitely looks like you've done something wrong. Like, delete it and don't say anything or just leave it there. And these sorts of stories, they wash over in 24 hours. It's just a bump. So, yeah, I agree with you, Soph. I think that sequence of events probably made it out to be more than what it actually was. But Jenna, speaking of the news, and this is actually a rather terrible topic, but the news in the UK has been awash with a stabbing incident in Croydon in London. Look, Sadiq Khan has been pretending to do his job. I think he's been convincing very few people in the process. But the Royals have got on board and William is doing his bit to support a charity focused on reducing youth crime.
Yeah, Cara, it's a horrific incident where I guess it brings in this horrible lens of coercive control and horrible gender norms and things like that that come into the mix. And their hats off to the Royals that have sort of risen above the fray of politics on this, and they've decided to go into the heart of the matter and talk about, crime that's happening on the streets and in the outer suburbs of London. Whereas you see, Sadiq Khan, who probably wants to see himself moving into, the Commons one day, in any type of role, and the fact that he's just issued, a couple of sentences as a statement, whereas the Royals seem to be rising above it. And I think that's the real interesting part. And there's a real dichotomy now of, people slam the monarchy and say it's outdated, we don't need it. But I think we do, especially if this is one example where we do, because at least they rise above it. Whereas I feel everyone is getting so bogged down in the election cycle, they're all just worried about how they can make a tragedy play well for them, depending on where they're at in the election cycle.
So I think that's quite a good point, that the monarchy, I suppose, is the consistency or that constant thread that goes through the British cultural and political landscape in between the electoral cycles.
Absolutely, Caroline. I think it shows how successful and how popular the monarchy has been, not just in the UK but around the world, and particularly here in Australia. It is that common thread through society. We look to the monarchy, particularly Queen Elizabeth when she was alive, for that reassurance, to steady the ship, to calm the waters and, reassure society that things will be okay and offer, some very strong words of wisdom. So I think Jenna's right when these political types just, again, insert themselves into the story and are out for themselves. There's an agenda always at play there.
And Carrie, can I just add, I think it's really interesting that the fact that all of these issues, it involved children, so that's something that obviously the Prince and Princess of Wales are very focused on at this point in time. But it is interesting, and when, all three of us have been to the UK recently, and you do get this distinct vibe that maybe the King isn't that popular, but when Kate and William do speak, a lot of people listen. So it kind of falls on them to take the responsibility of, how the palace responds to these issues in their local, in their backyard, which I think is really interesting and one to watch moving forward.
Totally, and we can see how much that even the King and Queen are allowing William and Kate to be front and centre of things, even though obviously they are next in line. But Soph, the Sussexes, they seem to be the flip side of that coin, again labelled climate hypocrites, having flown 7 times in 14 days. They don't seem to be too introspective, but, they should be able to hire advisors to point out the obvious for them.
Well, this is where I think they let themselves down, Caroline. It's such an obvious thing that they're doing that is so hypocritical. How can they jet set around the world, carry on like these mega stars and then dictate to the little people that we're in a climate emergency and we need to save the planet. They actually said they were only ever going to have 2 children to minimise the damage to the planet. And here they are stepping on and off planes like it's going out of fashion. And I think that just loses them any credibility that they have left, Caroline. If they're going to tell the general public, it's a case of, you know, they need to set an example here. But when they're saying something and doing the complete opposite, who on earth is going to listen to them? And I would argue few people will. And I think that is why they are so unpopular.
Now, so just before we go, and I've got less than a minute, but Camilla this weekend has been hanging out with Judi Dench at the Braemar Literary Festival. It's got heavy hitters written all over it. You've seen Camilla up close. How did it look to you?
Caroline, this is fantastic. Camilla, who's definitely won the hearts of many people, she's turned the tide. I went to one of her events in June at Hampton Court Palace, a part of her Queen's Reading Room, where she had Ben Elton and Judi Dench on stage. It was remarkable. Camilla was there and everyone was just so excited to have her sitting across the aisle with the public. And I think she's done a lot of good work here. And I think it's a terrific thing that she's doing. And there's been so much popularity with it. So a big tick to her.